Okay. Hello. Welcome everyone. Give me a second to make sure everything's coming through. Apologize for the delay. Just getting a few setup things out of the way. And I just want to make sure that my stream is live and everything's running well. Alright, no, looks good on this end. Looks like my audio is coming through. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. First off, welcome everyone. My name is Ian Boyd. I'm a library specialist in the Learning Spaces and Services Department at NC State University. And I've been doing a couple of streams kind of over the past few months in Touch Designer. All right, cool. In Touch Designer. And then this is just kind of a continuation of that series. So if you're interested in Touch Designer, you can go back and look at those videos. There's some pretty interesting stuff like happening in them. You know, I touch on a lot of different things you can do with the software. But I kind of wanted to take a different approach with this stream. And I wanted to kind of break down a larger project that I've done that involves like a lot of bits and pieces to create kind of an interactive experience. And I guess the easiest way to kind of introduce this project to you is just to kind of show you. So let me jump into it. Unfortunately, I can't do it live here because I have it set up in a dedicated space, but I have a video of it. So let me go ahead and play that for you. So I think I'll let it play once, and then I'll kind of talk through what's going on. You'll notice I had more hair back when I was filming this. Okay, and then that's kind of the general idea. I'll kind of pull it back to the start and we'll kind of talk through what's going on here and what I'm using Touch Designer for in this project. I guess what I'm using Touch Designer for is everything. So easy answer there, but let's kind of talk about what's happening. So to start with, you notice I have my setup. I have a Connect Azure mounted up here that's pointing at the projection space that I'm looking at. And I think it's important to state that although I'm using a Connect depth camera for this, you don't have to use a Connect. You just need a webcam for this to work. The Connect does do one thing for me beneficially, and that's it kind of masks out things in the foreground. So when I'm like crossing across the map, you notice I'm not just like triggering everything. Instead, I'm not triggering everything. It's just kind of like losing the feed for a second and going back. And then that is something I'm using the depth camera for, but this would totally work with just a normal webcam. And that was kind of the intention. The whole point of this project was to kind of examine how someone could set up a dedicated installation space, you know, like you might see at a museum or an art show or something like that, where you didn't need like a big technological buy-in. Basically, you just need a projector and a webcam. And then the idea was, as I took this whiteboard, that's just something really common in schools and like office spaces world over, and I used it kind of as the interactive space. So what I'm doing here, these dots I'm moving around, are actually just laser cut discs of wood with a magnet attached to the back, so they'll stick to the whiteboard. And I've just painted them different colors. So nothing high tech here, pretty lo-fi. But you'll notice as I move around, the camera is looking for the different color space, and when I change colors, it will recognize that the color has been changed and it will update with data from a different data set. So the two data sets I'm looking at are levels of food insecurity against 18 to 34-year-olds below the poverty line. And it's important to state that this is a prototype, but it was a good proof of concept that you could use larger data sets, incorporate more colors, and kind of map them to each one as you go. So basically, as I switch between the colors here, you'll notice that it's recognizing what state they're on, what data set they're coming from, and where to display it. So we'll let it run a little bit longer. I'll just move it away from North Carolina, and we have South Carolina pop up. with its data set, and we switch. So we can compare data from the same set, from different sets, pretty easily and on the fly. So kind of easy setup. I left this one in here. It was a mistrigger because I triggered it too quickly, but it's good to put in some bugs too. And then the other thing that this can do is it can display video. Because what I wanted to do was kind of demonstrate that you're not limited to just text popping up. You can take advantage of any of the capabilities Touch Designer has for displaying media content. So yeah, play a video. Right now it's just a prototype. When we jump into breaking down how this works, I'll kind of talk about more, like, I think you'll see a different video pop up because I stole one from another member of my cohort. But anyway, this is the basic idea. That's like what it is. It's a color detection to drive interactive content pulled from a data set. And we'll kind of jump into it and see how it works. So let's just jump back to Touch Designer. Okay. So here is the project as a whole. Like, this is the whole thing. It has one thing that's broken right now because I don't have my Connect hooked up, but we can hook it up, I believe, to the webcam that's in here already. So hold up one second. So what we're gonna do, video device in. So I'm gonna kind of showcase this with another webcam that's already hooked up to the computer. Mine, unfortunately, is running for the OBS in the stream, but we have more. Let's see. It would help if we got another one. Hold on, I might be able to hijack my USB camera real fast. I have another one back here if all this fails. Don't want to delay things too much. Yeah, so we have one right here. And like, this is pretty simple. All you need to see is the video input to understand kind of how this works. Like, it doesn't need to be, and you'll look at the camera I'm using right now. Like, it's like just like office USB webcam, and this would work for this. You don't need like a really costly or efficient webcam. You just need something that can see pixels on a screen. So let's pop that in. I think I'll put it just right beside my other webcam on the top. Do a double stream. Maybe over here. There we go. Okay, I think that'll work. All right, so let's set this up. Video device in. And we're going to use let's see, is it recognizing? My apologies. If this doesn't work, like I said, we'll just get an image and that will work too, but I really want to show you this with a webcam. Actually, we don't need this running right now. Like, you don't need to see my face here. Like, I like talking to you, but let's turn off my webcam for a second. Deactivate that. All right. Okay, and we'll put on here. What error am I getting from you? Initializing. Interesting. Hold on. Apologies. Don't mean to put all this like blank space in the video. It doesn't matter too much. I find it weird that it's like just going in all of a sudden. Usually we don't have many problems with this. Turn this off. And one more time, just to try. Video device in. Yeah, it looks like it's continuously like updating and initializing. Project container 1. Let me just see if it works anywhere else. That doesn't really make sense, but I just wanted to see. Okay, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And my guess is that it's just something weird with OBS currently using it as well. So we'll put it back in. So hey, welcome back. I can see you. But real fast, what I want to do here. Okay. You update. Gotta update the drivers on the fly. Real fast, what I want to do here is kind of break down what each of these parts are. And the first thing that's really important, I think, for this is talking about how Touch Designer has kind of improved its organizational tools circa 2022 that were pretty good. So if you right-click anywhere in your network here, you have a couple of options to add operators, which is pretty normal. But now you can add comments and annotates, which are pretty awesome. Also networks too. They all function somewhat similarly. They have a few things that keep them as separate things, but I just want to show here. So a comment is just a text box that you can float like a node out in your scene. And you can write in it, like, this is where my videos go. And you can just leave it up, and you can just like leave it in the background, and it kind of lives behind the stuff that you're doing here. So you notice that I put it in here. I can like comment out whole sections of my network and say, yeah, this is where it's at. I think you can, yeah, you can also change the colors of them too, to say all green ones are related to chops, you know, all purple ones are related to tops, and so on. So it's a super handy way of doing it. And what I'm doing here is with these annotate boxes, which are a little different because they give you the same option to kind of title them and put things, but if you move them around, you actually will move anything inside of them with them, which is handy if you want to like quickly relocate like big parts of your network back and forth. So just to show that I've kind of used this to identify the things I work with, and it's been very handy. It's like commenting your code in a visual node-based network like we do here. So real fast, I think we should just need to break down like how everything works. And I think we can do this in a different way. I really want to get a video feed in here for you. It's a bummer that my webcam is dying on me. Let's see. So video device in, well, not out. Video device in. Real fast, let me check my EOS webcam utility in here. Be right back. I just want to try this real fast. Okay. This is actually what I was using last stream and it worked fine, was the EOS webcam, but if it doesn't, it doesn't. I think actually I'm going to bear with me here, because it's also lowered my frame rate down quite a bit. You see the drop. Let me see real fast if I can restart Touch Designer and if that fixes it. So I'm just going to kill it. I'm going to quit. Let's go ahead and bring this one down to, okay. And I've got my examples here. All right, let's just bring this back up. Thank you for bearing with me. I want to make sure. And like I said, if I can get in a movie feed, I'd really like to, because it's much easier to see this concept if you have something you can update quickly. So movie, on movie, video device. Okay. Yeah, and this one just kind of stuck in initializing loop. Warning, initializing. Just want to see. Let me try turning this off real fast. Deactivate. Oh, it also might be, hold on. I think I might know what's going on here. USB to video device, signal format. Let's take a look. Yeah, there we go. Let me see if I can circulate between these two as well. Hold on, I might be able to do both at the same time. Let's try this. Okay, I think it's just going to use one, but I was going a little too high resolution with it. Let's look through here. Okay, but you can see me here now. Now we're in Touch Designer. Thank you for bearing with me for a second, but I've moved my webcam over. Also notice that you can kind of take advantage of multiple things in here. Yeah, we'll leave it here for now. So anyway, this is what the Kinect would be seeing. Although obviously, if I went into my video, it's going to be looking at the board. And it's going to get a view that it's like kind of the targets that are on there. Yeah, totally, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using my Kinect as the point, instead what I'm going to do is use this video device in. So let's get rid of this. You can just break the link, disconnect it. I'm going to push this in to my composition node here. I think that'll do it. Let me see. Oh, wait. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong point. Because what this is doing is compositing out this info. So really what I need to do is just put this in, disconnect that, and then rather than darker color showing, because I think what it's going to do is, if I get like really close to it, it would work. But rather than darker color, we'll just say over. Yep, and there we go. All right, we're moving through. So what this has done, so you can see it all updating on here, is that I have each of my targets kind of set up in this network. So like at a big overview, you'll notice that as I move around, you're going to see things change. And I'm wondering if you'll see any colors detected on here. Looks like you are up at the top here. Yeah. So you'll notice that as it picks up this part of my skin, we're getting a really strong red input here. But I've only set it up to look at the red, green, and blue channels, because those are the colors I'm working with. You'll notice up top here, with the North Carolina one, we got the green screen coming through pretty strong. So you can see that the green screen's coming through here too. But if the color is not correct, like with what I'm sampling, and then over here, yeah, you can see the blue on my shirt. It's picking up the blue right here. But notice it's not picking it up on the red. So all this is saying, and then you'll notice whenever I pick it up and we get this strong color through, you'll see a trigger goes 0, 1, 0, 1, on and off. You know, you can kind of see it all over as things flicker through. And these are the triggers that Touch Designer is using to generate the logic for this. So real fast, let's kind of, this was the broad overview. And then these triggers feed into a network where we're basically triggering everything on, so you can see the whole big overview at once. If I move my hands around, you can see things trigger. And basically all this is doing is feeding into Python code, because you can use Python. Oh, the text editor. Crazy. On my machine, I have Sublime installed as my coding environment of choice, but we can just pop it up real fast. An easier thing to do that would actually give you some separation between types is you can actually have a full text editor in Touch Designer that you can use and look through. And you'll notice then that I just have some pretty direct Python code that's just saying, hey, you know, it's just a nested if loop that's saying, hey, if North Carolina is in channel name, draw data from North Carolina table. So I have a table set up over here. I have this broken in half. I can show you both at the same time. Let me zoom out. So in here, if you haven't used Touch Designer before, you can jump around from levels by zooming in and out. It's like you go deeper into your network. But let me move over here. So if you have your text. So this is what's generating all the text for it. Oh, also, if you look at my map right now, it's going to be going nuts, because like as I move around, it's like picking up those colors, and you can see it, you know, like picking it up as I go. And this is what you might run into, like why I wasn't using the Kinect. Like it still works, right? But like, it's not as reliable because you get this kind of like flickering across everything. The second you take a step back, though, from everything, it will find the right colors and work correctly. But let me go into my text right here. So what it's saying is I've got two containers because I set up one here and one here. But to look at the text that's displayed. So I basically put all my text into tables that it's drawing from. So if North Carolina is in state name, go to this table and choose column 0 and row 0, and you'll pull North Carolina. And then from there, if there's red in the channel name, go to the next table and then go to index 0 or index 0. And like what that's saying is, okay, what are we looking at? Are we looking at low or very low food insecurity or 18 to 34-year-olds below poverty level? Pull based on red or blue. And then it does this for everyone. If Kentucky, and then as you see, you've got this one for the line, and then it will actually go in and grab the statistic. So if red is in the name, we'll go over and pull the number. So low, below poverty. And then it will just back and forth, and it will just pull these out of the tables. I actually don't think I'm using this one at the moment. Maybe I am. But it'll actually pull the data out of the tables. As it pulls them, I just compose them into basically the shape I want, I texture them, and then they'll come out as the data that's being displayed. And you notice as I move around, it's updating here too, right? So yeah, so like different things are triggering, so it's updating the record. The reason it doesn't update so fast is because I actually have a delay worked in here where you actually don't see it displayed until something's on it for a long time. So right now, the transparency is being controlled, the opacity is being controlled by this whole network back here, which is basically saying, hey, I know everything's flickering and going crazy. See if I can get one to freeze for a second. There we go. See how it goes? If you freeze something for a second, it's going to display it. If you're just getting this flickering, it's not going to update or display. And that's built in, so you just don't have like the whole flickering across the whole thing constantly. So basically all this is doing is it's looking at each of these spots and saying, okay, if this is the way it is, then I'm going to change the color. But let's break down how you would make this, like at an individual level. So we'll look at one at a time. So basically, if you go back to the video, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dots. And these are all the spaces that are being observed by the camera at any given time. So I'll come back over here. And if you look at it, we're actually duplicating the video feed and we're cropping it. The reason I have these turned off is that you're basically displaying all these mini videos like in the preview. And if you have them all enabled at once, it can really slow it down. And you don't need to have them enabled to work, right? Like you can just turn them off. Okay. So right here, this will be a good one because I can just kind of move out of the way. It's funny how you can see me in the background. Hold on. Let's just turn me on so I can still talk to you, even though I've lost my video feed because I've repurposed my USB. So as you come in here, you can see that each one is just a very small cropping of the entire video. So we can like zoom out here. And you see all I'm doing is I'm cropping it down to a few pixels. And this gets you a better idea. And what I do is like, let's say, holding still, I want my left eye to be the target. So I'll go in, crop out all this unnecessary resolution. Try not to move until we're just focused on the one target, which is my eye. All right, cool. For the purposes of this demonstration, I think we're going to just pick up on the green screen behind us because that's going to provide us a steady green color. That's going to kind of show as an example of what something looks like if it's focused in. So real fast, I'm just going to trim this down to about the size it would be for our trigger. All right, this is probably a little bigger, but that's okay. The less resolution you have, you actually don't need this setup at all, I will say. I would encourage you to work with it, but at the end, the real magic is happening here in the top two, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is a very good visual and like debugging kind of environment to work in. Touch Designer is really good at working with visual elements because you can see them all displayed in real time. It's constantly updating. You can constantly see what your network is doing. You don't have to compile anything. It's just running in real time. So you might as well take advantage of this to troubleshoot everything at once. And it's been very beneficial to set it up this way. And not too hard to do once you know the technique. So what I have is I've put in and I've cropped it down to my target. And then I've made 3 lines in Touch Designer. And each one of these represents a different color. And we're looking for a different color each time. So I was wondering. We'll go through. I was wondering if I could like find a space by my head. Oh yeah, there you go. It's like right there. Yeah, so you see right here, the green screen. So I've got this red sticker. The green screen is being picked up on the green and then the red, on the red. If I take it away, it's not going to see anything. So what I'm doing here is I'm just putting in an RGB key. And what that's saying is, hey, we're looking for a value, and we're only going to display values that have a bitmap value between 0.187 and 1 for red. So a pretty big range for red. For green, 0 and 596. For blue, pretty small. And what I'm doing here, the reason there is some value overlap is basically I have my painted targets, right? Yeah, that's actually showing up pretty well. My finger too. I have my painted targets. What I'm trying to do is troubleshoot how close I can get them where they're not fading out completely. So I'm trying to find this happy medium before they start fading out, so I can go about here, but then giving them enough room that if lighting conditions change, they won't change too much. So for this red right now, I'm really locking it in on here. So I'm setting it just to this red. Okay. And then blue for the red value. And now you notice basically what I'm doing is I'm calibrating it, right? I'm calibrating it to the target. So calibration's easy to do because all you do basically is hold your target up, and you'll notice now there's none of my hand in here. There might be a little. Yeah, there's still a little bit of my hand in here. It's about the same color. You notice we can set it to this, and it's easy to do because we just set the color in front of the camera and then mess with the values. We can see it when it gets better, and we can see it when it gets worse. So calibration is pretty fast to do and is very visual and obvious, when you need to go and make sure that it's calibrated to the correct values. So basically, this whole setup right here is all just a way to make sure that I'm looking only at the red values. So the levels are just basically me taking out all the other values from the feed. So I've taken out all the greens, all the blues. If I put greens back in, you'll notice that we can start seeing green again in the feed. But we don't want that, right? So we're going to get rid of it. So even though it's keyed out, you'll get green in the alpha space if you let it. Same for blue. So we won't any of this. So we've just put all the different levels down to 0 and only left our value, our red value up all the way. The channel mix is again the same kind of thing, where we're just looking at it and we've said, so you have your 2 columns, R, G, B, alpha. So if I put this to 1, check this out. I just want to see. Basically what you're doing is you might start getting noise around the edge, and this is trying to be a noise reduction technique. Let's see if we got it. So I'll take these out. I don't know if you saw too big of a difference, but it's good for removing noise, which is why I put the channel mix in. And then the last one is just a threshold. So it's saying, okay, anything below this value, less, will be visible, and we'll display it as white. So it takes all the different colors that we put in here, and it just puts them straight white. And then what this does, and this is where the technique really happens. All of this basically has been a way to prepare the data before we get to this step. And then what we do is we use something called a top to chop. So we have our small area, and we're going to pull this off, and we're going to say chop top to. And if you do this the first time, let me make sure I just have this grabbed, you're going to get something that looks like this. We don't really need this right now. Let me close this. Close. Yeah. Taking over the screen. Man, I'm really large. So, I don't know. Maybe we do split our screen. Let's do it just to make this a little... I don't want to be like taking up like the whole picture. So basically this is what it looks like if you do it for the first time. And what it's trying to do, you'll notice that it's not displaying anything right now. If I get my trigger, let me see if I can get, oh. Let me grab the red one, because I can recreate red right now. All right, there you go. I can recreate red right now. I can't recreate, there you go. So you notice as I move it, it's displaying values where the pixels are, R, G, and B. So it's trying to represent this image as a series of graphs. And what this is it's looking at, let me make sure. Right now it's looking at every row in the pixel. So right now it's looking across. And it's looking at row 1, 2, then 11, and if any pixel is white, which they all should be white, you'll notice they're all capped at 1. It's going to display them at that much. If I used a different one, let's say I went back and grabbed just the space. So top 2. You'll notice this is super noisy, and the reason it's noisy is because just of the grain, like of the video feed. Like all video feeds will fluctuate in color, and what it's doing is it's representing that, you know, through these kind of noisy values. Now, if you change it, you'll notice like we get rid of some of that noise because the values have gone up and down. It's still jittering around, but you'll notice that it changes. And I can take that out, back to our green, introduce red into there. Suddenly we get this variation in between. So basically it's tracking all of our channels at once. And I think you can crop it to show both. Let me see, rows and columns. The thing about this is a huge amount of data, not data, but information to display. So you'll notice like I have all of these down to look through. And this data is hard to parse. But you know what? We don't need to do any of that, because all we need to do is look at a specific pixel. And that's what we're doing here. We're looking at one pixel, in the center of each of these triggers. Like I've set the very center value to be what it's looking at. And that works because we've kind of set up this area around it, whereas like, especially with the circular ones that we have here, this one doesn't work as well because we have, you know, like text interlay around it. But for my circular targets, you know, where you're just like kind of observing, my circular targets, this works super well because you have a centralized block of noise, and then only around the outside you really have any noise at all. On the center, everything's pretty clean. So you notice is if I hit that center pixel, it triggers and turns on. So again, we're only looking at one pixel right now. You could also, if you wanted to improve confidence, you could put several pixels out and use them as a target. But for this, I've only needed one pixel. It's worked pretty well for me. So basically, it's just looking at the value of that pixel. And I've said, okay, so it's going to look in the middle. And although this is going from 0 to 1, it doesn't have to, right? Like if you notice, this one's kind of going crazy here. Let me see if I can move it around. Yeah, you know, like as I move it around, you see, because it's just tracking the value of that pixel. And you notice that I have an RGB and an alpha value that I can use. You know, all pixels are made up of RG and B values. But I don't need any of that because I'm working with solid white. So instead of, basically you have an option on here where you can put in the red, green, blue, or alpha. I don't need them though. I only need one. I only need the red channel because it's going to be 1 if it's white and 0 if it's not. And same for green, blue, and alpha. And that's kind of also what this was doing along here, was it was normalizing these values always to white so that we could just get one value. So along the way, let's see if I can, yep, you can flash it through. If it hits that one pixel, it's going to trigger and it's going to display as NCR. The reason I change these channel names, the reason I don't just use them as just R, is because later in the Python script, I'm going to look at which channels have which string values in them, basically, which characters. So if it has an NC in it, I know it's a North Carolina. If it has R in it, I know it's red. You know, so I've made one for each of them. NC blue, NC red, NC green, to kind of display. And then as they go through here, each one is kind of used for different things, and they're outputted accordingly. So right here, set up, I have one that's feeding data, down here into my overall one that's displaying all the values. So like whenever a value is triggered, you'll see right now we have NC green is being triggered and Alabama red is being triggered. And we just triggered Kentucky red for a second. But this is going to update as we go from here. You see I've actually selected things out. NC green's not here anymore. It's because I'm only looking at red and blue values right here. And the reason for this is I have a separate script, and we'll look over the scripts in a little bit. But I have a separate script basically for each process. So this is the script that controls what text is displayed. That's what this script is doing. So it's choosing the text from a table, pulling those strings out and displaying it. And I don't need the green value for that, because what the green value is doing is coming over here. And it's saying, this is the script that controls playing videos, which is done by the green value, the green disk. So the red and blue disks switch between data sets. The green disk plays a video. So we'll jump back to this real fast, just as a reminder, kind of now that we have an idea of how this is working. So again, each of these dots on here will kind of display the value. And if you have a red or a blue, it's going to display a certain data set, and then it will skip ahead. If you have a green value, which will be coming up next. If you have a green value, you're not going to display data. What you're going to do is play a video, in which case it could be related to the state because it's known that NC is in the channel. So North Carolina green is being triggered right now, and it'll display from there. So just like how this is all heading towards something, I wanted to say, like how this is all kind of working together. So from here, basically what you have the option to, and I've also used the keyboard to control this as well. So you notice I have a keyboard in. So if I ever want to, like, you know, fake these values, I can, for testing or debugging, I can just use my keyboard keys. And it will look at the same channel values because it's right here. So I guess now it's time to kind of talk about the code and like what runs it. So Touch Designer, you'd be looking at this and you'd be like, well, you know, there is no need for code in Touch Designer because it's all visual based, right? It's all node based. Well, it's not actually. Touch Designer is kind of written on the back of Python. Well, it's not made with Python, but the scripting language it's using is all Python, and it's being used all the time, whether you know it or not. So as an example of this, let me pull up, let's just say something basic. We'll say like a noise top. So looking at this, maybe we can do this. Hold on, let me just do this in this VIN since I have this all set up. This makes more sense. Okay. So we have this noise top right here. And you'll notice that it has all these different sets of parameters, which I think are locked up here, unfortunately. No, I can pop them out. All right, cool. I thought you could. So maybe you can see this a little bit better. So normally these live up here, but you can drop them out if you need. But basically what we're looking at is you have all these different parameters that you can use to control something inside of Touch Designer. And this is different depending on what node it is. You know, they're just going to do different stuff. And like that's nice and visual and easy to kind of wrap your head around, like kind of playing around with them. You know, like the period's going to make it bigger or smaller. Well, at the end of the day, these are really just Python methods or functions. And I'll prove it to you because if you pull these out, you're going to start seeing that you have all these reference tags that are just built into them straight. And this is what I'm using. So if we jump into our Touch Designer Python code that we're running, we're using something called a chop execute. And what that is basically that every frame Touch Designer runs, this is going to be looking at one chop in this case. Really, this is just looking at the North Carolina green, but other ones could be looking at others. So this one is just looking at this one chop, which is displaying all this data to just show when something is triggered. And that's all it's looking at. You know, the whole time it's just seeing, are these zeros or are these ones? And there's a bunch of different parameters that you can look at for this. So you notice that you have some logic operators here. So the logic that you can look at is, does it turn from off to on? Off being anything below 1, on being 1. While on, so while this is on, while this channel is 1, you know, do something. On to off, when this is turning off, trigger an event. When it's dropping from 1 to any other value, you know, trigger an event. While off, So if it's off, continually do something, and then value change. If the value changes at all, do something. Um, and then you can also mess with like the values you want to use in there. But yeah, like if any value change happens at all, do it. I think this is on, but I don't think I'm doing anything with it. Yeah, I think it's just on by default, so I can turn that off and it won't affect anything. What I'm doing here is within this, and then if you pull this up, you'll have a text thing associated with it, a text box. And this is where you write your code. Let me pull up one that has nothing in it just to show you what that looks like. So let's go to our DATs, shop execute. So this is what a new one looks like, if you can kind of see in here. You basically have a function that says on to off return. While on, return on to off, return, while off, return, on value change, return. And basically all you do is you stick your blocks of code inside there. So you say, okay, when the chop I'm looking at does something, you know, do this in Python code. And that's what I'm doing. So to understand this, we also need to know about, and then if you're a Python whiz, you still need to know this step, which is you need to know how to reference objects and parameters inside of Touch Designer. So let me just see if I can move this around. And that's what this is. So I've got some variables up here at the top, and all they are doing is serving as stands in for my references. So you'll notice that I have my movie animation play, because this one controls my movie. Let me jump over there real fast. We'll get rid of that. And then I can jump into my movie. It's playing right now because it's very green. So I'll jump in here. So this is basically playing a movie file. This one is talking about raising food awareness, food insecurity awareness. We're going to go ahead and delete these out because we don't need audio right now. Hopefully you haven't. Oh yeah, my desktop audio is muted, so you're good. Okay. Be bad if you were getting the audio the whole time. But we'll keep going. So basically, because my thing is green right now, and you can see it's green because we have the green screen in front of it. If I put my hand up to block the green, hold on, give it a sec, you'll notice that it stops playing and it reverts back to the start. We let it off, we're going to go. And because of that, it's because it's being controlled by this line of Python code. And we'll look at it right now. So what is this saying? So we got some variables. We're saying OP project 1 container 5 movie file in. Okay. So let's say container 5. Project 1 container 5 movie file in 1. So I think that's when that's coming from. This actually might be big. So test movie. This is the one I'm looking for. So we'll go in here. So I think what's important to talk about now is when you're referencing nodes in Touch Designer, there's two ways you can do it. You can do an absolute reference that starts at the top of your tree and goes down, or you can do a relative one that's based on the location of this chop execute. Right now I'm doing a absolute path. So what that means is I'm going to start at the top level of my Touch Designer project. And if you open a new Touch Designer project, almost every Touch Designer project starts with this, a perform box and a project box, and you're inside of it making your first stuff. So you'll notice up here at the top, my address bar has nothing in it because I'm at the root right now, like I'm at the very top. As soon as I go inside this, you'll notice I have project 1. And then if I go in here, container 5, you know, as I go down. And basically what I'm doing is I'm finding that absolute location of the node I want to change. And I can follow this all the way in, right? Container 5, they probably need more descriptive names. But again, I've done it with annotations. And then container 1. And then finally, constant 1, the name of the node. So once you get down into the root node, you just find the name and reference it. And this is set in parentheses as a string. So you have operator, parentheses, or at the top, project 1, container 5, container 5, container 1, constant 1. I got there. And this is why you want to use variables, because it's a lot easier to type out test movie rather than reference this every single time that you go in and change something in Touch Designer. So, and you can also kind of just do what it talks about, dim lights, switch activate. And we can talk about what all this means. But we'll just talk about playing the movie right now. So, on, off to on. So when it turns on, you know, when this is green. So right now we're off. When this is green, do something. And then that's kind of what we're doing. So what we're doing is we're going to movie animation play. And we know which one that is in here. And we can look at it to our movie file. I just want to see if I can block it real fast. Yep. So you see right here, we have this play button, and this play is being influenced by other things. So I turn it on, play turns to on. I block it, it turns off. On, off. And basically, you know, all we're doing is we're driving this on here. So we're saying, okay, and you can see the parameter. When is play, yep. Yeah, so you've got your par.speed equals 1, your par.cuePoint equals 0, and then your value 0 equals 0, and then movies 1. So it's just saying that we can reference this back here, you know, like where it's like, when we want it to play or we want it to do something, we can, because we're changing here. Now you notice I have this whole network to do it. This isn't the best example, I guess I could say, because what I've actually done here is I've built in all these things to affect the timing. You see you have this ready trigger, this timer. So this makes sure that things aren't done too quickly. And that's important for making an installation because you don't want it to turn on or turn off every time someone walks by. So in order to control that, I've made a logic network, which is like, okay, let's wait. Now we'll do it. Like I block it, let's wait. Now we'll turn it off. You know, we'll turn it on. So I built in a delay, you know, which is why it's not the best teaching example because I can't just show it like on, off, on, off, on, off. But you can kind of see that I am driving it, like you have that in here. And the play is coming from that. Let me see if I can block it. Off. Let's find it. There we go. Off. On. Off. On. You know, so it is still all being controlled via it. But this is how this is working. It's basically saying when this turns on. So all this is from this channel right here. When this turns on, do all these things. And all I'm doing is changing the parameters. I'm setting the play parameter to 1. That means true. I'm setting it, yes, you should play. I'm setting the cue point to 0. The cue point controls when it starts from. So 0 is the start of the movie. 1 is the end. I'm saying you should start at 0. Start at the beginning. I'm saying the constant par value. This is the one that controls all the timing logic. I'm saying it should turn to 1. It should turn on. Let's see. Yep, so you see it's flickering back and forth as I go. So the whole thing that controls the timing should be like, okay, go. You know, we want to start watching the timing. And then it's going to talk about the values within here. The dim lights. Yeah, so this one's interesting. So if you look at my video, if I play a video, let's go back. Let's see if I built this in yet. Yeah, you actually, I don't know if you can tell, but all the lights dim, you know, like, so I've actually put an overlay that turns the lighting down to half, you know, what the value would be. Except the targets have to stay lit up because if the value changes on them, the things that change differently. So that's going to dim the lights on the rest of the presentation while we go. And this is kind of getting into UX and UI design stuff where it's like, you know, what makes a better experience for the user? What makes a more intuitive experience for the user? But it's all controlled via here, you know, like, and you think about it. And you can do all this in Touch Designer, which is wild. And you have all this control over the final look of everything, which is super crazy and super great. And then the last one I have is switch activate par index 0. I don't know if anyone wants to nerd out over Touch Designer. This is the stuff I've kind of been realizing lately. So you'll notice that anytime Touch Designer is sending data to something, you have it basically visualizing a pipeline. And that means it's pulling data, it's processing. You know, it's using CPU or GPU power to render this thing on the screen. Let me see if I can block it. But if you put in something like a switch between, if there's nothing on the screen, so basically I've just put in this nothing stuff, it will not use power to process it. So just to keep in mind that, like, when this churns, we're using processing power. To save on processing power, we'll turn it off, basically, when we're not using it. And then Touch Designer won't use it anymore. That's more abstract and advanced, but it's basically just to save on power that I don't need. Because if I just did this straight, even if the video was paused, it would still be drawing some processing power to render the video behind the scenes. Not the played video, like it would be less. It would just be the image basically, but it would still be using power. And if you have a lot of stuff, you know, that's like not changing all the time, it can really slow down your interactivity. So there are some things you can do to reduce that. And I found that like that's kind of been my transition into an intermediate touch designer user from a beginner, is kind of starting to care more about stuff like this. I think I could say I'm intermediate now at this point after making something like this. But you know, like pro is like when you're like modifying touch designer itself, you know, and writing your own shaders and stuff like that. And I'm not at that point, but one day. But basically just to say that everything is being controlled by when this turns on or off. Like this is the trigger that's running all of this. And then the last one is when it turns off. It has to do stuff too. You know, obviously, like it has to stop playing the video. You know, it has to turn the transparency back. You know, it has to turn the transparency to 0, so it's not on screen anymore. You know, so it has all these things that it needs to do also when it goes off. And lots of times this is just an on-off, right? You know, like the video is playing, now it's not. You know, the cue point was 0, maybe now it was like start at the beginning, maybe it's like at 1, you know, so it can restart again to go back from it. So it's like lots of these are kind of binaries. Like the lights were 0.5, you know, now the dim value is 0 because it was a transparency. It was like a black overlay. So like 0.5 opacity to total black, 0 opacity to total black. You know, no more blackness on screen to dim it. So like all these are kind of like, you know, 1, 1, on, off. They're just binary kind of operations. They can become more complicated, but for now, like that's all that it kind of is. Same thing, if we look at the code in here, let me see if I can bring it over here, because I'd like it to take up more of the screen. And again, this is where there's a benefit to kind of having all this together. Okay. So we'll look at this. Try to take up as much of the screen as possible, so I'm not on here twice. So we'll say I probably am not the best coder because it's not something I've had a lot of experience with. It's just mainly been more of a self-teaching process, kind of coming through Touch Designer and other applications. Like I've done stuff in Unity and Unreal as well. Unreal's a bad example because like Touch Designer, it uses nodes, but like Unity and stuff like that, I have used in the past, but I haven't ever thought of myself primarily as a coder. So there's definitely ways this could be more efficient and better. But this is a very direct way, so it's good to visualize. But at the same time, it's also like 500 lines of code, right? Yeah, because I have to do like all the logic for every trigger in like every scenario, which I know for sure I could clean up and do this more efficiently. Like this is not the way, but it is good to see what's happening. So we'll say if. So we're using kind of nested if statements here. So this entire, remember we have that off to on function on off to on. So that whole function encompasses all of this. I think we're still going. Yep. And and there's our return. You know, so and there that's what it encompasses. I think I actually went through 2. Nope, that's the whole thing. Yeah, that's it. So like, yeah, that's the entire thing, and then turns off. The you'll notice the on to off is a lot smaller. You know, just like that's it, and then we're done. But all this logic is basically to look at each trigger individually and say, okay, where does it go? So the first one we look to see, and I put comments on here so we can understand it. So first thing we want to see is how many circles are on the board in our code, and that's what we're doing here, right? You notice I'm only using 2 at a time. I didn't do it in the video, but if I put a third one out, nothing would happen. And the reason because we're checking to see how many channels we have active right now. So if it is, and then that's what this check variable is. Basically, we're looking at our null 24. And you notice I don't need a reference for it because it's in the same zone as I'm in. Let's see. Yeah, right up here. We're basically looking at it and saying, okay, and that's what that's tracking, is it's like if there's more than 2 channels turned on in here, you know, like don't do anything, just stop. And like that if would go all the way to the bottom and it would say like do nothing. So if box 1 is on, and again, like we can kind of say, this is just logic. We have it 0 because box 1 isn't on, but the second something triggers, it will turn on. if box 1 is on, then is not on. If box 1 is off, then we can do this. Populate the box with the correct text. And then we look at the channels. If North Carolina, and this is a nested if statement, right? If you've done Python, like nested if statements. So if NC is in the name, if Kentucky is in the name, find the state that we're triggering. And then if it's R, B, or G is handled by another one. But if it's red or blue, to switch between the data set, just change which one you're grabbing it from. And then we are also doing things like changing the color on the triggers. So if I go back here, again, this is UI stuff. You'll notice that as I highlight them in the state, it's going to be recognized with the same color. So it's going to change between red or blue based on this Python code. If it's blue, set it to blue. If it's red, set it to red at the same time. And this happens kind of more instantaneously. Like there's a fade into it, if you see. Like there is a fade to the color, but at the same time, like it's a pretty quick fade. And that's there as kind of like a hover. Like, yeah, a confirmation that like, yes, you have been on it. So we'll go back. So change the text color and then choose the right text from the data and display it. And that's basically it. Like that's basically all this whole thing is doing. You have to set up the logic, to make sure that it behaves well, but that's all your code is doing and all it's referencing. All right, cool. Maybe we talk about, I made these trigger setups, for interactivity. Maybe we could talk about them real fast. I think what I'm gonna do, since there's two Ians just kind of talking at you, I think I'm going to go back to my webcam here. We're going to turn this off because I think I've demonstrated how it works. Whoop. Let me see if I can bring myself up. Take this off. We'll feed this in even though it's broken. Okay. And activate. Yeah, I'm back. So back in my corner where I should be. So over here, kind of like to look at it, I think we'll take a look at some of these triggers. And I think as a way to show the triggers, I'm going to have this chop execute look at my keyboard one instead, because this will be a better way to display. So in here, null 23. So I just want to look at null 23 now. And what that will do is now this whole network, all these boxes that are feeding into this one point doesn't matter at all, because now all I'm looking at with this logic is these 4 keys. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you'll notice, let me jump back over here to my map. Jump over here to, this is kind of the output, I guess you could say. If I hit the keys, 2, 3, 4, it's going to pop up. So I can show the data now as we go. And I can kind of talk about how this trigger, like this kind of trigger delay on everything works. And we can do the same thing for these. So what states do we have here? North Carolina and South Carolina. So I could also have this join up with them. So NC, right here, crop NC. So I could have this one look at it as well. So instead of looking at null 2, this is what controls the color value on there. Instead of looking at null 2, we could change this to 23. And now, if I press the 1 key, you're going to see that the state turns red or blue, because I have it looking at it, where before it didn't. If I hold it down, then it's going to come out like that. All right, and then where's South Carolina on here? Crop it NC, LA, FL, LA, MS, SC, this line. So same thing. This one also should be null 23. All right, and now if I hit the 3 or 4 keys, you're going to see that it pops up here. So we can control the map now. Not the whole map, because we haven't put it out to our whole keyboard, but we can control these 2 different variables just with the keyboard. And so what's great about Touch Designer, it's fast to make these changes, fast to route them around. You can build, the small things in your network, and then you can get rid of them. We'll close that real fast. But yeah, I think what I wanted to showcase was kind of how this like fade works. Because you see everything's kind of on a delay, like the movie, everything. It's good to kind of show that in a network, I think. And it's pretty simple. So we'll jump over here. So state mask tops. These are basically all the masks that are in place to go. And you'll notice that all of them are the same color. Let me split my screen. I keep not splitting, to like try to give you all more real estate to see what I'm doing, and then I'm like, I need to go back and look at it. So we'll just leave this up for now. So you notice that this is the color of the default background color of the state. So if we go find North Carolina up top, you'll see that we have a constant here that is just giving you the channel values. So basically 0 is black, 1 is white. So this color value, if you give it an RGB value, is 0.93, 0.75, and 0.68. Sometimes they're normalized between 0 and 255. I could have done that. Like, I could just put it between 0 and 255 right here. But I've just left it 0 to 1, just to keep it easier for like an on-off kind of thing. And it doesn't matter too much for me. If you really wanted a really specific color value, you might have to do something different. But this works for what I'm doing. So the second I hit a key, you're going to notice that this constant updates immediately because that trigger goes off. But I want this kind of slow fade in effect. So look over here at the state. Kind of comes into blue and kind of fades out slowly. And all that is being controlled by a lag. So basically I'm setting the lag value and I'm saying, okay, there's going to be a 0.5 second lag that gives you the animation moving to the right part. So it's going to change the value slower here because we have a lag applied. And what this is doing is actually it's kind of making it like keyframe animation, right? Like you kind of have 0.1 and you have 0.2 that you want to go to, and it's animating smoothly between the two. And you can change like how it works. You can change things like the slope and the acceleration. I haven't needed to too much for like the Space UI, but you can change things like, let's give the lag 2 seconds. That's a very long lag. So what you're going to see is it goes much slower to kind of finish off at the end. And then it's going to come down. Oh, I think I did it maybe the opposite. Yep. So it's really going to slow the value change down. Let's say, what if I set this one to point for 2 seconds as well? Yeah, so yeah, that's a very slow transition if you see there. So it's like still hasn't quite gotten back. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. We could put it up something ridiculously high. We could say 10-second lag just to demonstrate the concept. So watch this. So you see it's very gradually coming up to blue. And it looks pretty blue here, but it's probably about halfway, like at this point. And then whenever we let go, it's going to be the same 10-second delay on the backside, right? So it's very slowly, turning not blue, like on the screen. And that's all controlled by your lag value. So if you're setting up any kind of interaction and you want that kind of display to not be instantaneous, lags are your best friend. The other thing that I'll talk about is timers, and we'll go to another one for that. But basically, because a lag is like a instantaneous, like it is going to start changing the second the value changes. Like the second I press 1, you're going to notice it becomes like a little blue, right? It's going to change right away, just slower. A timer can offset the start of something completely. So we'll kind of talk about how the timer works. And it kind of, and like everything here, like 1, this is what's setting the value. 1 is blue, 2 is red, and then this is just lagging it to kind of bring it in. But if we wanted to get into a timer, let me modify my original script a little bit here. All I'm going to do is add a green to the keyboard. I want to make it one that doesn't like change anything. So I'll add key 0 on here, and if I hit key 0, and then this is, I'm just renaming them to what we have. So from channel key 5 to NCR, or NCG, sorry. That's going to be my green value. So now if I hit 0 on my keyboard, it's going to turn green. And then I need to actually set in the point NC blue. I think I might be looking at the wrong one here. 0, 1. No, whatever. I think it's because this one's watching it. Sorry, I got to go to my movie playing script and reroute it to my purposes. So chop exec 13. Look at 23 for me. Okay. Let's see if we get that. Yep. So we still have this pop up, but I think that's okay right now. I'm not going to get into super debugging right now because I'm not too worried about it. Like I think the logic is just pulling it up because of other things that are going on. So we'll leave it around for now. It's a bug of coding on the fly. But basically we have our video player. And that's really what I want to kind of show here. So in the movie value, we just kind of got to see what we're looking at. We'll go to container, and here is our movie setup, and this is the one that's using timers. So right now we have two inputs on our timer, initialize trigger and start trigger. So you'll notice when this turns off, basically all I have here is an invert. So if this one is on, this one's off. If this one's off, this one's on. So you see, they just switch. And the reason for that is because I want to, the initialize just starts it over. So when this turns 1, start it from the beginning. When it turns 1, start playing. And what this is doing is it's basically just counting to 1 over a period of 80 frames. And I said 80 frames because I think that was the delay on the video, but you can convert this to seconds too. Like you could just be working in seconds, 1.33 seconds, repeating 80 frames. You know, same length. Touch Designer runs at 60 frames per second pretty consistently. So we can just kind of set it in there. So you'll notice it's running. Kind of pulls up, and then we're good to go. So the timer basically offsets that completely, and when the timer is done, then our lags can kick in, and then that's when you kind of fade up to the video. So if I like put it on, video comes up and plays, you'll notice there's a little bit of a lag there. It's pretty short. It's a 0.4 second lag, 0.5 second lag versus something longer. Like I could set it to a 2. Transparencies are hard to see because the second your eye can kind of latch onto it, even though it's still pretty transparent. Like, yeah, you can see that's kind of a slower fade in. You really see the North Carolina in the background. But like, because it's a slow fade in over something, like it takes a while to fade in, but you can see it really fast, right? But that's controlling these two lags here. So we'll turn it back down to 0.4. I don't know why I'm turning it down. I'm not going to save this. This is not a production code. We'll go here. But then basically at that point, all we're saying is, right when this kicks in, you'll notice there's this kind of delay on the lag. When that hits 1, play the video. Same thing. And then fade it up. So, and then both of these are being controlled here by the level. So it's just looking at this null. Zip, bring it up. Zip, bring it up. And then you see that right here. That's the opacity. And it's moving up slower. We'll get this lag because we just set a lag to it. So it goes up. So that's basically it. You know, basically how you get to play video. The other things also happen when it turns off. You know, like they have to go down and then these trigger again to be reset. So you can also incorporate timers as well. Timers are a little tricky. It might be worth looking at them more in depth. Every time I look at them, I feel like I have to look them up a little bit. But you can look in here that you need to have a timer on. You want to have it sequential, usually. Sequential just means that it will turn on from when you initialize it. So you have the initialize trigger, the start trigger is what's going to kind of start it. When that turns on, it's going to just move up in a sequential number of frames, you know, 0 to however many you have set, and then that's going to be how it works. You need to set the length type to fixed. Infinite, it'll just go on forever unless you turn it off. For me, I do want to have a fixed delay of 80 frames, 1.3 seconds. You want to have this on for play, and you want to have, watch this real fast. I think this comes out more to be mapped here. So yeah, speed on. Something about the speed. I think you can set this. I think I might break my thing. You can play things backwards. Let's get the equals out of here. Well, you could. I don't know if it's via speed, but you can play things backwards if you want to. Like you can play them in reverse. I had an animation that I'm not currently using on here that used a lot of minuses and pluses to work, but I think that's in the movie file itself. Yeah, so if I set the speed, to -1, it would play backwards. I don't think it's going to work because I think it's going to start from the 0. Yeah, it's just not gonna do it, because the reasoning for it is because it's already at 0 and it wants to play backwards, you know, to itself. The key point is 0. I'd have to change it to a 1 and then go backwards from there. But as you do it, things are going to update. So you can play videos backwards via it, but not in the timer. But basically, this will be a fixed point for how fast it kind of starts going up. You'll notice I set it to 0. This is why it's not working, is because this is how fast it's going to count. So now it's counting so slowly, because before it was like a normalized value, it was just 1, and we're going to get there now. Okay, so now it's counting up in increments of 0.15. So, if I set it to 2, it would go super fast. We'll go through. If I set it to 10, yeah, we're right there, right? So this is basically controlling the speed of how fast your timer goes. Generally, I just put it at 1. Makes sense. 1, for how it counts. Key point 0. Like I said, I could put it somewhere in the middle, and then it starts counting somewhere in the middle. But again, it's not super important. You'd mainly leave these alone. Cycle off unless you want it to loop through things multiple times. Basically, what you can do. Let me see if I can do this on here. No, I wanted to see. I think because it just goes from 0. But if you have something that runs longer, I think I need an infinite run. Let's see. Yeah. If you have something that runs longer, it'll just go through the cycles if you want, and then you can kind of set cycle alerts and things like that. So there, since I have my max cycle set to 4, it's going to cycle through 4 times. Let's let it go back to initialize. I think it has to come back down. I might have to pulse it. Interesting. You just want to see real fast. Okay, cool. Well, we'll turn it back off. But basically, you can cycle through things if you want to. I want to set this to fixed. 1, 0, speed 1. Sequential. I think I might need to initialize. Yeah. So the reason I needed to do it was because it wasn't turning off quite in the right way with the settings, and it wasn't initializing itself again. So, yeah, again, there's a lot of settings for the timer. So that's why I kind of wanted to talk through it. It's a more complex operator, I feel like. It's not as intuitive to just jump in and kind of start poking at. The lag's pretty intuitive. Like, it's pretty easy just to be like, oh yeah, you set it to 0.5, you'll get to your value half a second later, This one has more stuff, so I found myself looking it up. But basically, I just build these into the user interface, right, to make a more convenient, use for the user. Because I don't want the video to come up immediately. Because what if someone is walking by, right, and they're wearing a green shirt and it triggers? I want to put in that delay because we want it to kind of be put in. Like if it goes up and then it stops, nothing's going to happen, because I feel, nope, nothing's going to happen. We didn't make it. And the reasoning for that, again, is if someone were to walk by the camera, you don't want it to be turn on immediately because it'll look really bad. It'll be flickering all over the place. So that's why I put in all these delays into everything, just to make sure that people aren't activating them accidentally. And if I wanted to be safer, I could make the delays even longer. I kind of know what I'm doing, so I can make them pretty fast and responsive. But if it was something else, I might want to set them longer so people go up, move the discs, and then step away, and then it kind of kicks in. But you can control that in Touch Designer. That's the cool thing. You can control all of that. Okay. Real fast, maybe talk about these ambient animations that we have here. I don't know if you've been noticing, but as the circles are built in here, you can kind of see these pulses radiating out, and I think that's a good opportunity to kind of talk about how you can use Touch Designer with other applications to kind of make a more complete product. So that is in this one, circle pulse animation. And we can just watch it for a second. This is what's happening, basically. You notice that it's teleporting around. You can kind of see them side by side here. Kind of sits there, and then after a delay, it's going to play an animation. And this is an extremely simple animation I just made in After Effects and then imported in, but we can take a look. So yeah, movie file, pulse animation. It's rendered out at the resolution it needs to be. So you see it's very small. And here you kind of go, you've got black on white, because we're not working with transparent video here. We're just working with a MP4 file. But by using an overlay, we can make it, the black transparent. And that's what this comp is. It's just an add, so lighter colors get added, darker colors get subtracted. So black is 0, so nothing gets added. Nothing gets added at all. So easy. What do you call those? Like in Photoshop. I'm probably not going to remember. I'm sorry. I should know, but sometimes I get sleep deprived and words escape me. But in Photoshop, you like blending modes. Maybe that's what they're called. Like that you have each layer set to a different blending mode, and you have all those in Touch Designer too. I think you actually have more. But basically, I've put in some good annotation here. So basically what I've said is, that we're going to have this timer running through continuously. And then it's going to count chop, between 0 and 9, because we have 10 things here. We're coding, so we start at 0. And then when it gets to each one, so it's going to loop back around, this is going to be the location. And the location is controlled by a chop execute, like we've been doing. It's controlled by Python. So let's jump in here, because this one's pretty simple. Did I put the table in here? I did. Okay. So basically what I went around is let me see if I can show you in here. So I basically went in my master file. If you click this and right click, you can display pixel guides. And you'll notice that you can find the location of every pixel in your project that you're working with. So let me zoom back a little bit so you can see. And they're updating in real time down here. So I can see U and V. So I can see that this location is 0.24 and 0.575. And then what I can do is I can just throw these into a little table, right? So we have all the locations for every state right here. And what it's going to do is that when it's time to go to this state, I could have written in the pixel locations here, but then I can always update them in the table, like if I need to. And I know they're in a centralized location where they're easy to find. But I can basically put it in here and say, okay, if the count is 3, if we're at 3, we want to be at that location. So we go to 3, 1, and 3, 2 for the X and the Y axis. If it's 5, we want to go to this one and this one, for the X and the Y axis. And all this is just stored in the table. And it was the very high-tech method of me mousing over where the location on the screen they were, and then putting it into a table to pull from later. So we can turn the display pixel values off. This is super useful, by the way. Display pixel values. It's the same way that I also sample, like where to put my pixel for the camera. Looking at each trigger. I'm like, okay, got to put it right in the middle here. That's at 0.423 and 0.578. Got it. So it's actually super handy for looking things up. Let's turn that off though, because we don't need it right now. Got to activate the viewer. Display pixel values off. Okay. So anyway, going back to this, then as soon as we go through the count, basically it's just going to take this, and what's going to affect is it's going to affect this transform. So you'll notice, because this doesn't need to move around, it's actually, this white ring is always going to be visible, but since the ring itself is also white, you don't see it, right? So it's inside there, but it hasn't pulsed yet. So it's going to jump every single time and move around. And then I think the last one would be just the play, which just comes from here. So when it jumps, we get a pulse, and the pulse just says play. So cue off. I'm not even sure we can, on. So I don't know if you can see it. It's a pretty fast flicker. But when that pulse hits, it'll flicker to on. And sometimes it's slow enough you can see it. Sometimes it's not. But we only need it to go on once because all we're doing is hitting the cue. So the cue is like, go, play the video. It plays through, we jump over, and we do it again. So doing that is just a pretty interesting setup to kind of get your pulsing circle running through the whole thing. And it kind of showing how to think about it inside of Touch Designer, like if you want to build these like ambient elements as well with movie files. So yeah, I mean, and I did some more animations that aren't in this version about like the movie player would like blow up into it. And then all I'm doing is just controlling movie files overlaid with the Touch Designer movie player. So I make my animations in After Effects usually at the same resolution that I put it in here as the output, and then kind of just locate them in the screen and use this movie play animation with like pulses and stuff to control them. So kind of what we're getting into. But anyway, to just like make the map and stuff, we can talk about that here. I think this is being done inside here. No, this is just the circles. Where's my map coming in? Yeah, map, pretty simple. Just an image file in over an image file, that I just made in Photoshop and just brought in as elements, and then we made them interactive with everything else. So the map itself isn't really doing anything. It's just serving as a backdrop while we run other things around it in real time. So cool. I think that's most of the stuff I wanted to touch on today. Let me know. This was a more in-depth look at one larger project. I know I've kind of flipped through smaller ones in the past, but hopefully it was helpful to you. Hopefully it gave you some ideas. There are some people I want to credit also, because I think I haven't been doing that in all my videos, and I should be doing it because there's a lot of great touch designer content creators out there, and like I've used them so much to develop things. And what I want to touch on today is the main method that made this possible was this color sampling technique, in here. It's not doing anything right now because we don't have video feed hooked into it, but this was taken from a video. I think it was called, the channel's name was Programming for People, and it was just basically a video on how to sample colors inside Touch Designer, like how to find specific ones. So please check them out, like find it. And it was super useful to kind of set this up and be like, okay, yeah, I can look at each of these frames, do it interactively, and then find the execute, for each one. So you can just find out if a pixel value is there. So that basic technique came from a video I found, and shout out to that creator for making it. We have a little bit of time left. I think I could do a kind of preview for what I want to talk about next time. Let's jump into that real fast. This is more to get people excited than anything, because I think it's pretty interesting. So let's open a new one. And open. Okay, cool, made it. All right, make sure stuff's running. So this is more complex, and if I'm doing this one, I also need to give a shout out. We've just been autoplaying here in the background. Let me find it. Yeah, this guy, Torin Blankensmith. This is how I've kind of stumbled onto this, and then kind of how I've been messing with it, and I'm excited to do it. But he basically put together a series of videos showing how to get Stable Diffusion, the OpenAI image generator, kind of working inside of Touch Designer. And I think that's super cool because there's so many applications that you can do with this if you just have instantaneous image generation, like inside of Touch Designer. So I'm going to work at next week is kind of developing a video on how to apply this and kind of use this in different topics. But he went in and he made kind of the backend setup to get it working. So this is really just his file that he gave out. So just to give him a shout out. And basically this is the code, where it basically lets you embed Stable Diffusion via an API, like inside of Touch Designer. And we're using a cloud-based computing system. You could do this locally, like you could compute it on your desktop, but it'll be slower. So what we're reaching out to do is using a cloud-based compute render service that you can get renders. I think I have 25 cents on my account right now. I think I can get renders for 10 renders for a cent, I think is the price they have for it. So it's pretty cost efficient, if you're using it. So like 1 cent will give you 10 renders. But basically what it is, oh no. Hold on, you see all right, I'll change my API key after this because I do want to show you this. But basically, see, just don't look at it. But basically what I'm doing is that I can generate things based on other ones. So I have my prompts in here. If you're familiar with how image generating APIs work, I can put my prompts here in Touch Designer. So I can say, I don't know, maybe watercolor, yellow, bright, not like that, bright. Okay. And then we can just generate an image based on it. Something that's interesting about how Stable Diffusion works is it has a model where you can use another image as guidance, like we have here. We have this kind of moth input, and then this is what I've outputted here. Let me kind of just save these off to the side. If you're ever looking just as a placeholder inside of Touch Designer, you can just set them to a null. You can lock the null, and then disconnect, and you just have it like floating out over here. But real fast, we'll just run it. You can kind of see how quickly it works. So you'll see the loading, scrolling through. Yep, and then we have made something again. Yeah, like more of a watercolor look. Was this one a watercolor too? No, this is heavier. I didn't see what my prompt was before, but the watercolor influence, more yellow worked itself in, kind of a bright color. So we can generate that off of there. And what this is useful for, like, it's kind of like, well, okay, that's cool, that you can generate images, but like, what can you use it for? A lot of stuff. Like, there's a lot of really great applications that you can use it inside of Touch Designer. So like, let's say like right now we have these two images. Let's say like an image fade. What is it? Just a fade in here. Let's use a switch for now. This will work. There's one that works a little better, but a switch will get the point across. Let's say you're running something like a video inside of Touch Designer, and we'll turn on blend between inputs. And let's say that you have people like maybe visitors in a museum or an installation or something that are putting inputs in real time. And then all of a sudden what you have is a network that's kind of taking all of these. Let's see. It's because of my slider. Let's zoom in a little closer. And you can do stuff like this, right? Where you're like making your own video that's kind of like fading in between. These are actually a little too close together, I think. But like, that like they're modifying it on the fly. And because you're using Stable Diffusion, you can use an image to serve as like kind of the way to keep it in line, right? Like my guidance is up pretty high. But you can put in more iterations, more guidance, more resolution. I found that lower resolution images just tend to work better. Probably because the network it's trained on, the resolution's not crazy high. But we can also just turn off image to image and then kind of show like that as well. So yeah, so now there is no image guiding it, and now it's just like whatever it comes up with from the prompt, watercolor yellow bright. That's it. But like this could be worked in here too. And there's a lot of ways that you can blend between these to make really cool videos, is kind of what I wanted to see, and that you can do interactively. A very cool project I saw the other day on the Touch Designer Discord was someone was using these, and he had a webcam set up above, looking down at a table, and the people were using pieces of interactive like color paper that were like just torn up into strips, and they were putting them into like patterns, and then that was being fed in here via webcam as the image to guide off of. So we used the image to image, and then it was like displaying like the AI on top of like the stuff that they were working with on the table. So like really cool applications that aren't that hard to make if you're familiar with Touch Designer and you have like a process like this in place. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about it. I'm kind of excited to show more applications, because I think that's what I'll be doing. Like I don't need to show you how this works, because you can just look at Torin's video like on that if you just want to kind of get it set up and running. But I think what I want to do is kind of play with it, kind of show you the stuff I make, and then talk about some applications, how you can use other inputs and things like that to modify these, AI generated images that you're making here. So you can blend between. What is that node? I was wondering. It always bugs me if I can't. This is like the thing I dread, like in every video, where if like I forget the node I need, and then I'm like, da 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 da, and it's fine, but it is the thing. I think it's cross. Let's see here. I think it's a cross top. Yeah, exactly. Go back to it. Oh, also, something I didn't know existed. Let me make sure I can find them again. If you are learning Touch Designer and you don't know about this, I want to give a shout out to this because it blew my world open. If you go up here to help, and you come up here to operator snippets, this will open a full video inside of Touch Designer. Like it'll open a Touch Designer project inside of Touch Designer, which demonstrates how each of these work. So I just had the cross, and what it's basically going to say, it cross feeds between two inputs, and then what it's going to do is kind of break down like the various node pages. So like I have the cross first on here, and it's really, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to give me it's going to give me like a little demo of how it's working, and then the transform, where it's going to kind of talk about how it uses the second node to kind of talk about all the aspects of it. I had no clue this existed until like a week ago. Not that I'm disappointed, but I just wanted to pass along that if you're learning Touch Designer, Check out operator snippets. Like if you don't know what something does, or you just want to kind of like flip through them, because it is crazy, how much detail they have and like how they put on here. And you can see, yeah, just basically just like how everything works. It's great, it's a lot of documentation to kind of showcase how everything works. And if they have like steps on here, yeah. Because I mean, I would say Touch Designer is not the most intuitive product if you haven't been using node-based, like applications before. But this is great, and this makes things so much easier if you're learning, I think. If you're ever curious about what a operator does or like what it's supposed to do, just come on here to the operator snippets and just kind of look through. And, doesn't have to just be here. It can be any of these. PBR, talking about texturing, talking about the 3D nodes, the SOPs, like how the twist works, like the various different examples of it, even how like things like how data operator works. What do you have for like a chop execute? Oh yeah, like lots of things to showcase how they work. Yeah, well on, well off. Yeah, very cool. So check these out. Thanks everyone for tuning into the stream. It started off a little delayed. I had a few technical things to troubleshoot, but I hope you enjoyed this kind of longer form video of looking at a bigger project, how to break down the kind of little steps that make it possible, and how to kind of incorporate it with organizational tools, like the annotate boxes that Torin's using here in his Touch Designer video. And hopefully I'll come up with some pretty cool examples of ways you can use image generating AI inside of Touch Designer for things like video, for things like interactivity in terms of that, and break down those projects for you. So be excited for the next one, be looking out for that. And if you have anything else you want me to touch on, or anything that you're interested in, let me know, because I'm always excited to explore any part of this program and just love working in it. So thank you everyone. Thanks for joining me.